So here we go, Islam part two. Just kind of a quick review of last week. We talked about the word Hindu. Its kind of literal meaning is from India. Little linguistic deal that it's derived from the Sanskrit word Sindhu, but the people who came there couldn't say S's in their language, so it became Hindu. And it basically is another name for the Indus River. So the Indus River and the Himalayan mountains are kind of the top. And so Hindu originally just meant those who are from India, based upon this geographic feature. And when we looked at the map of the world, we find out, there's a large concentration, primarily the concentration of the Hindu faith is in the country of India, possibly because of the natural boundaries that isolated it for so long. So we went through the first of our six kind of categories of ultimate concern. Who is their God? And before we get into the specifics, remember that this is a menu and you are free to choose any or all that you would like. Even though these are the three, what we might say, primary gods of the Hindus: Brahma, the creator; Vishnu, the preserver; Shiva, the destroyer. And they're called the Trimurti, so we get that Trinity idea. Interestingly enough, if you remember, Brahma is not worshipped. You don't go to a temple and worship Brahma or see him. You might see images of him, but he's typically not worshipped, whereas Vishnu and Shiva are. And from them come all sorts of avatars that have names that you're probably more familiar with, like Krishna. So even though we list these three, Hinduism is incredibly polytheistic. There are a range of gods that are either consorts of these three, avatars of these three, offspring of these three, some kind of weird permutation. Whenever you talk about Hinduism, you're going to talk about this word, this three-syllable word that we reduce to Om. It is the key syllable, the key word. Actually, it's three syllables. AUM is how we would spell it in Arabic letters, or in our English letters, I should say. And it is thought to be the sound that is this primordial sound that connects you to Brahma, the creator, and was the sound from which all of creation originated. And that is why in Hinduism you would often have these chants and mantras with Om as a key word. These are some of the other gods. We got, our Krishna, we know him, Rama, and Rama. Ganesha is the elephant god, Kartikeya is the monkey god, and all these Kali is the demon-killing god. So all sorts of gods. But again, unlike, for instance, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, where the God that is the God and is worshipped as high and above, this is really choose your God. Whichever one works for you, you can have as your personal God. You can offer allegiance to them. You can worship them in various ways. So we started with that. Then we talked about their sacred writings, and there's two categories. The most important are the Shruti. That is what is heard. We're talking about one of the oldest religions in the world, 4,000 BC. And some of these Vedas go back to about 1500 BC. We could look at some of the concurrent events in Scripture. We did that a little bit. But that which is heard, the reason it's that which is heard is because this is an oral transmission. Writing things down back a couple thousand years BC didn't happen. And so the most important are these that were remembered, that were passed on. There are four Vedas: the Rig, the Sama. The Sama is just an abbreviated Rig. There's nothing new in this. It's all in there. It's just put in this shorter form so they can use it in their different practices and worship. The Atharva Veda, this is the ceremonial one. So if you want a wedding ceremony, you go there. If you want worship songs, we're going to find them here or here. The Yajur Veda, I got to look up because I don't know a thing about it. But maybe we can figure it out here. It is the ritual, the liturgies of different religious ceremonies. So this is more what we would think as, well, it's actually called the Book of Spells. And apparently in Hinduism, marriage is a spell. Do with them what you want. But nonetheless, that is that. And this is the Book of Ritual. So these Vedas are thought to have always been in existence. They are thought to be discovered by mystics who, in a deeply meditative state, heard from Brahma and recorded these words, these rituals, these songs that have always been in existence. These are the most sacred writings of Hinduism. The second category is Smriti, which is that which is remembered. And these are the more, they're also oral, but they're not thought to be as authoritative as the Vedas. They're not thought to come directly from Brahma as the Vedas did. These are, for instance, two epic tales, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. They're called Puranas, is kind of the general thing there. These are sort of epic tales of what happened. This one is about history and creation. It's sort of like, we might say, akin to our Old Testament. How things happened in wars and genealogies. The Mahabharata has in it probably the most famous of all of the Hindu works, the one that's most well known, at least in my experience. A lot of people have heard of the Bhagavad Gita, probably because particularly in the West, this is the basis and introduces us to that guy Krishna that has many components that have more of an impact on the West. So these are their sacred writings. But we made the comparison, again, while the Vedas were thought to come straight from Brahma and are inspired, if you can't say in that word, and these are epic tales, they're not authoritative in the way we think, for instance, of the Bible as being authoritative. Because, as we'll see tonight when we get to moral code, there really is not much of one. They don't have 10 commandments, they don't have that sort of thing. These writings don't work that way. So they're just vitally important that give them ideas about a little bit about history and a little bit about how they conduct themselves in their religious rituals. We talked about 10 ritual acts. We went through all of them. Again, we looked at Islam, the 5 pillars that any good Muslim does. This is not the case for Hindu. Probably most Hindus do bhakti, which is their private devotion where they select their favorite god or goddess, and they have in their home a sort of a shrine maybe or a place set up where they offer devotion to that particular god, maybe selected for an affinity or some benefit that comes from that god. Puja, is that how you say it, Joyce? Just lived in India for a year or two. Is their public worship when they go to the temple and offer that. But their public worship, if you go into a Hindu temple, because it's polytheistic, you have a whole slew of different statues and idols. And so if my God that I offered bhakti to is let's say Shiva, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to offer my worship and puja to there. If yours is Vishnu, you're going to go over before Vishnu. So it's not some, like if you go to a Muslim place, everybody's going to kneel, they're going to pray, there's going to be the sermon on Friday. If you go to a Jewish temple, there's going to be the things that happen. If you go to a Christian church, we're all focused together. This is not the case. There's not even necessarily a day where they're all going to get together. It's just whenever, wherever, however. Fire sacrifice is sort of part of or akin to puja, where you would offer something in fire, not like a goat or an animal, but typically a food stuff or a fat that can burn. A ghee is a very popular fire sacrifice for the Hindus. Mantra, you probably know that repetition of some way that's thought to connect you to the divine. Grace or prasada, this is when you take your offering in puja to the temple, sometimes you're given a piece of it back. If you bring food, it's placed before the god, and sometimes the priest will offer you some of it back. Now it's been blessed by the god, and that's the grace you receive. You bring flowers, you put them before, you might get to take some home, and those are particularly graced or blessed by the god. Service is what it says it is. It's the idea of serving, not necessarily at the temple or to the gods, but fellow human beings or animals or other living creatures. When we talk about kind of their worldview, you probably know there's reason for that. Astrology, similar to what we would think of as astrology, that if you're going to do something significant like get married or have an important observance, you would consult someone who will tell you the right times and days based upon the movements of the celestial bodies, their life cycle rites. And so from birth to death, there's this long list that there's a rite that goes with every step of the way. And they would not necessarily, again, that they do that. Maybe your family might be into that. Maybe your family's not. My family, like we do too. When you're born, we have a party, and when you die, we do something else. But other people might, oh, you're born. Oh, you took your first step. Oh, it's kind of like how much of the baby book are you going to keep track of? A little bit there. Pilgrimage, not necessarily as in Islam to a particular place, i.e. Mecca. Although the Ganges River is a very popular place for pilgrimages. Sometimes it's to a shrine, it's to a particular temple, to a particular god that you would go. And of course, we all know and love yoga. Don't have to explain that. Yoga and mantra sort of fit together. So that was the review from last week. Everybody got it, right?
Thank you, because I wasn't here.
Okay. I did that in 13 minutes last week. It took an hour.
Yes, it is. That's why I was better you.
So here we go. Moral code. As I said a minute ago, we really don't have in Hinduism a moral code like the Ten Commandments, like the law, like the Sharia law we talked about with Islam. They do have what they call prusharthas, and I'm butchering all these words the best I can do, which literally means these are 4 human endeavors. So the idea of right and wrong in a moral code is very nebulous in that sense. There's not like sin that needs forgiveness. However, these 4 human endeavors are the way that in observing them, it's thought to maintain fulfillment personally and in the society. So the first of these is called Dharma. You may remember the show Dharma and Greg. Why? Because her parents were Eastern religious advocates, and so they named her Dharma. This is the Oxford Dictionary of World Religions definition. The order and custom which make life and the universe possible, and thus the behaviors appropriate to the maintenance of that order. Got it?
Sure. Life is perfect.
So obviously a bunch of words that are telling us the idea is there are principles that kind of hold the universe together. And as we observe these principles and act in harmony with them, and practice what it would then be called Dharma, it is what allows us then to maintain order in our lives and order in the universe. Basically, Dharma, without being specific, is anything that seems good to you is probably okay. Now, not bad stuff. There is this idea that you should conduct yourself rightly in keeping with the order of the universe. So for instance, there are things that are for them kind of moral principles that you should obey that are necessary for life. Some of them they define negatively, like the absence of conceit. So it's not good to be conceited, which we would all say, well, yeah, but what does that mean? Practically, it's not thou shalt not lie. Like we know it, it's nebulous. The absence of hypocrisy allows you to keep and encourage Dharma. Speaking truth would be considered something that would bring about Dharma. Compassion. And for some, absolute Dharma is the principle of nonviolence. So you might connect to...
Say thou shalt not kill.
Thou shalt not kill. That would be our command that would have something in mind there. So basically, in Dharma, everything in the universe is connected. And your actions, which are in keeping with the moral principles of the universe, which are not clearly defined anywhere in their religious writings, allow that order to maintain and put you in connection, because everything that exists, if we want to talk about the soul in a human word, every living thing has a piece of the creator Brahma in them that is what gives them life. And so we're all connected because every living thing has this piece of dharma. You probably also know where it sounds like this karma that tells us that the reason every living thing has that is because I'm a living human, but the little worms that are everywhere this time of year, that was my uncle because he didn't do so good in life. So I got to connect to him. I got to be respectful and non-violent toward him, which is a problem. The iguanas around here.
Isn't that what you were saying like last time about the Siva, the service, that everybody has their dharma in it, so therefore we should.
Right. Every living thing is incredibly valuable. So we have to give service isn't just to serve.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say, by recognizing that we all have dharma in us, so that we should be kind to everyone.
It gives you a good excuse just to eat vegetables.
Potentially.
Well,
Obviously, you think of Hinduism, a lot of people,
Was it not?
Talk about-
Well, they don't want to kill their Aunt Edna, that's the cow.
exactly, the reverence for
Frank, and so they,
Right.
yeah, they're
so there is that
a devotee.
that spiritual or religious idea behind that, that connects them to all living things, and they want to do right by all living things, because in doing that, that helps you become more pure in your mind and in your spirit. And the purer you get in your spirit, the sooner you'll get to the fourth of these purusharthas, the four human endeavors, which is the most important, which is akin to salvation, which we'll be talking about later. Second of these four is artha, literally means affluence. So dharma, this universal principle, ties everything together. Human endeavor also should endeavor for artha. You should endeavor to be prosperous. And part of what Hindus say is you look after the material needs that involve earning money, social recognition, power, and that sort of thing. Now, they would probably also ascribe to what we know is scriptural. The love of money is the root of all sorts of evil. So you're supposed to pursue the wealth that is needed to provide dharma for all those who are in your sphere of influence. But you cannot go so far as to fall in love with money so that your pursuit of money and that sort of thing instead harms. So there's like this fine line of balance in artha. Yes, you should pursue material things, material possessions, even affluence, but limit it so that it doesn't control you. And in pursuing it, you harm others and therefore break dharma, which comes back to your karma. And that's not good because you're going to come back as that worm outside. Third one is kama. This one you probably know because the most well-known kama is the Kama Sutra, which is an Indian book that has to do with physical and sexual pleasure, and kama literally means love and joy and pleasure. So the unity of all living things, the thing that connects us all, we should be aware of that. We should pursue material things and we should pursue pleasure. Kama is in mythology the god of sensual love and enjoyment. And so that's why this is it. So you can see why this would be, these two. You're telling me if I'm Hindu, I can run after money and sex. Apparently, yes.
As long as you don't hurt anybody.
As long as you don't hurt anybody in the process, that would be important. You don't take advantage of anybody of whatever it is. So you see how this is appealing on some level. This would be that sort of thing. So kama is a word that connects to a mythological being who is later depicted as a gorgeous young man surrounded by celestial nymphs shooting love-producing floral arrows. Sound like anybody you've ever heard of? So we got a connection to Cupid, where all of these mythological things, ultimately you read, you go here and say, wow, that sounds a lot like this. Why? Because human nature, right? It's human natural. I will stop there. Anyway, so these are three of the four human endeavors. We're talking about moral code here, okay? So there's not right and wrong, obviously, except almost like a do no harm sort of idea here, for lack of a better way of putting it, although it's much more philosophical than that. Even in the pursuit of money or pleasure, you still have to be respectful of the life that we all share and the life force that's all around us. So we're going to save number 4 for a few minutes and move kind of to a worldview. How do Hindus view the world? And to understand that, we're going to look at a couple things. First thing we're going to look at, we're going to get to karma and reincarnation, because that's very important. But before we get there, let's talk about how Hindus view the human life. They see it in 4 stages, okay? You start out as a student, whatever that word is. Brahmachari, which means student. This is actually supposed to start with a B. I misspelled it B-R-A-H, not H-R. My fault.
Is BR?
B-R, yes. So the reason this is you see Brahma, or you see the creator God's name in there. And so the point of this is in your youth, you're supposed to be one who learns. This is what allows you to get to know yourself and those outside of yourself. It's expected that you will practice celibacy. You will spend the majority of your time studying the Vedas. This is the educational portion. You're often paired with a guru who helps you better understand the Hindu faith and how all things are connected together. And so this typically goes to about the age of 25. From birth to 25, your first stage of life is your student. So I hate that I misspelled that. But you're learning about Brahma, your connection, that piece of Brahma that's in your soul, that piece of Brahma that's in everybody's soul, and how you're all related together. And the text, the sacred text, you're learning from them as a student. You go from there to a householder. This is the family portion of your life. Grihastha is how I would say it. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. Literally, that Sanskrit word means occupied with family. So here's when you're married, you start a family, you have a traditional Hindu wedding. That's very important in this, that connects you to your spouse. Very sacred ceremony. We go back and find that in the Veda. You're expected, because of the connection and the priority of all human living. This would be kind of like, what do they call it? The sandwich generation? Is that what we call this generation that's watching their kids and caring for their parents? Kind of in there. This is where you are. This is, as anybody knows who's raised a family, a crazy, busy, nutso cuckoo time of your life. Like there's a lot going on, and you learn a lot about yourself in this stage of life. So you've learned all about the Vedas, you're trying to get it down here, and now you're putting it into practice in spades. Like, here it is. You've learned it, go live it with other people. I've always found that faith is easiest by myself. Church is great if it wasn't for all the people, right? Yeah. Except for you folks.
Yeah.
That's where things kind of really come together. I can have all the doctrinal stuff right, but when I have to put it in practice, Jesus says the second greatest commandment is love my neighbor, and then I run into this person. Now it's a problem, right? And so same idea. You spent 25 or so years of your life, the first 25 learning, and now this is where the rubber meets the road, where you're learning how to practice Dharma and build wealth or artha and experience pleasure and love, kama. And in that, it is probably the most important stage sociologically, because those first 3 of the 4 human endeavors, you're really focused on here. From a householder, this goes typically to about age 50. It's kind of fluid. In there, you become a hermit. The Vanaprastha. This is up to about the age of 75. And this is where you transition from the busyness of family to a more spiritual, quiet life. The word means the way of the forest, so that you're even hearing that you're going to get away. Who doesn't like to go take a hike in the woods? As a 50-something-year-old person, that would be what I would do every day, but it's
Way of the
thousands,
woods?
the way of the forest.
Of the forest.
So you begin to withdraw a little bit because you don't have all of the busyness and the connections of this part of your life. You become potentially one of the teachers of the students. So that's one of your more involved relationships there. And your goal is to, having come out of this crazy time of life, to begin to nurture your spiritual connection to that piece of Brahma that's within you that you hope to one day be reunited with, which leads us to the fourth stage of life. You are the renouncer, the sannyasin, for lack of a better word. This is the end of life. You disconnect from all material goods and worldly relationships. You're looking for complete transcendence, to be liberated, to be purified from everything. And so somehow to end the cycle of birth and death and rebirth. So this is where if you've done the Dharma and produced good karma, and you've done that enough times, gone through these stages and Dharma and karma to your heart's content, now this renouncer stage, which anyone would go into, even if it's your first go, is trying to somehow get in connection with, finally, this Brahman reality that's around, so that you might somehow break the cycle that we're all trapped in. What cycle? Well, it's the
So they
cycle
believe in reincarnation.
of karma and samsara.
Okay.
Samsara is reincarnation. This is birth, death, rebirth. Birth, death, rebirth. Karma? Well, this determines how you'll come back. And this continues until you've built up enough good karma and gone through all these stages of life so that you have ultimately renounced. And so karma is just that your soul's actions are carried from one life, and it determines what you'll do in the next. Our actions lead, cause and effect. This is you reap what you sow, to use a biblical phrase. Cause and effect. If I'm mean, if I don't respect the life force and all the living beings around me, if I abuse people, if in my quest for wealth or artha, if I'm in quest for pleasure or kama, I have abused, I have taken advantage of, I have mistreated because I wanted these things, it's going to come back on me. And so when I die, karma will insist that I come back as a lesser something. It could mean any number of things. It could mean a lesser level of humanity in the caste system, which we'll talk about in your social organization, or it can mean even all the way down to another life form, animal or living plant, or whatever it is. And so karma is that which determines how you are reincarnated. So the samsara loop is what we talked about. You've heard of this. They believe that when you die, you leave your physical body and you move on to a, what do they call it? Astral body. How's that? That little Brahma kernel of soul in you leaves the physical and becomes part of the astral, depending on your karma. That will depend on what happens between your death from physical to in that astral body between death and rebirth. Some folks, they spend time in a place where gods and goddesses live. So we might say that's equivalent to paradise. Others spend times in the underworld, which we would say is equivalent to Hades or hell. That's where the god of death rules. Others say you go to the ancestral realm. That's Black Panther, I guess, and go there and commune with your ancestors before you are reborn into either a higher or a lower form of existence based upon karma. So we kind of know this, right? This isn't new information. We kind of know this. Which brings us back to the fourth of the human endeavors, and that is moksha. Moksha is the greatest goal of life. It's to understand truly who Brahman is, that God is not separate from the world. God is within you. He's within everything. And through your meditative states, through your exercise of dharma and artha and kama, you come to the point where your soul is no longer tied to the physical. You have not mistreated. You have not built up any negative karma. And so at your death, you receive your ultimate goal. You're liberated and you return and are reunited with the ultimate reality, Brahma, from which your soul originated. Sounds great, right? This is what they're hoping for. Buddhists call this nirvana. Same idea. When we talk about Buddhism, you'll see, well, it sounds a lot similar to Hinduism. Yep. That's a lot of the same stuff. There's the fivefold path and some things are different. So these are the four human endeavors to understand the connection all living things have, to build wealth, to find pleasure, ultimately to be reunited, your soul be reunited with Brahma in moksha. This is the four human endeavors. Their worldview, all that they do, the life cycle that they see of a human life, ultimately is working to accomplish. Well, ultimately working to accomplish this, but is tied around these things. This is how they live. This is how they think. This is how they would see the world and their purpose in it. Does that make sense? Okay.
Do they ever, how many, is there a limit on how many times reincarnation they get?
Depends on how bad you are.
I mean,
There's no view of like hell, we would say. No view of it.
Right.
Your punishment is, if you deserve punishment,
lowering, yeah, right.
is to come back as a lower life form.
And, it's not, say, you've got 6 chances to make it good and then it's the end. It just keeps
It's
going.
assumed you have been born and reborn thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of times before you reach
Okay.
moksha.
Now, I've got another question that just totally,
100,000 times, wow, that's going through it again and again.
Yeah.
I was concerned about the originally, when you go back to the beginning of your presentation, 2 to 3 to 4 millennia before Christ, they were practicing this in the Himalayas.
It has its origins in the
And what
3
was
to 4
the
thousand.
term for that again? I thought there was like Sharia.
No, that's the Muslim law, Sharia.
Right, okay, I'm sorry, it's hard for me to see because the light's bounce on.
Right, I'm sorry. Yeah,
So that's not Sharia, okay.
No.
But that's completely different.
That's different.
That's what I thought, from what I could see of it.
You
Okay.
don't have any fix for 2 weeks.
You had another question?
well, this is just off the cuff because it's just something that struck me. They don't believe in violence. They don't believe in killing it. Are they vegetarians and they're
Most
eating?
of them
A
are.
lot of them are, yes. Most of them are. Brent?
Because in order to have just about any kind of protein, you have to, other than maybe cheese or something like that.
Gotta kill something.
Yeah, something has to be about any life.
Yeah.
Not many
Most of them are very
proteins.
strict. Most of them are very strict vegetarian.
It just struck me when it said that, okay. I didn't know.
Okay, one other question I had was,
Yes.
what was the relationship with the mountains and the river?
So the name Hindu comes from the name of the Indus River,
Right.
or Shindu, or whatever it's
No,
called.
you're right, Hindu
They just couldn't say
Simbu.
Indus.
Hindu. They just couldn't say the word. Their language didn't have an S sound, so the
Right.
S became H. So originally it wasn't a religion; it was a region.
Right, that's how you present it.
Right.
But the mountains that go across the northern part of the country
Or the
is
Himalayan.
Himalayas.
Right.
So, and that's a quite barrier.
Yeah, it's an
That's
isolating
what a
thing.
river is not.
The river is not, the Indus River, which kind of goes from the Himalayas down into Pakistan today, is not quite so isolating. It's not like, this uncrossable river.
Right.
But there are physical barriers that India kind of became its own subcontinent. That's what we call it even today. India is a subcontinent of India,
Absolutely.
densely populated. And so this kind of social religious system that's where it blew up. That's where most of its adherents are even to this day.
I find it interesting that the 2 or 3 to 4 millennia before Christ, that's 4,000 years before.
It's a long time.
7,000 years ago. And they've been practicing this, and I find that fascinating. Okay, thank you.
All right, social organization, you know this, right? The caste system. I have a picture,
Yeah.
best I can do. It's connected to the god Brahma. And the caste, this particular picture shows as a pyramid, is thought to be connected to a part of his body. So when you are reincarnated, you come back in a caste. This isn't a fluid system. You're it is more now. The caste system today is not always quite as rigid as it would have been. But the idea is the priests, the Brahmins, you hear the Brahmins, they're coming from the head. So it's like you work your way up. Your soul, as it's trying to find moksha, starts at the feet or lower on Brahman, the lowest of the low are the untouchables. These were basically the most menial labors. They did the stuff that the most unsanitary, worst jobs, the untouchables did. And so they're not even thought to come from a part of Brahman. The peasants, the Shudras, come from his feet, and these are the worker bees. These are not the most unsanitary jobs, but they're in the field. They're the farmers. They're the low, what we would say, the equivalent today, if you go up to Homestead, the migrant workers that are traveling, that's their existence. They follow the crops. That's how they live. They're the lowest class. From the thigh of Brahma, but from the merchants or the Vaishyas, or however you say that word. I haven't learned Sanskrit yet. So these are the ones that hire the peasants to do the work so that they can take the wares that the peasants are producing, the goods or whatever, the raw materials, and sell them. From his arms, you would expect, makes sense, come the warriors, the fighters, and from his head come the priests. So the higher up you go, the more access you have to resources, to artha and kama, to wealth and pleasure. And the lower down you go, the less opportunity you have for those things. This is not surprising. We don't have a caste system per se in our country, but we can see that there are people that fall into different categories.
Yeah.
In some way, although we have a much more fluid. In Hindu thought, if you're born a merchant, you die a merchant. And that's just it. And hopefully you merchant in a way that lets you come back. Maybe you crawl up, from his thigh up to his arm, and you come back as a warrior. And if you don't, because you mess up, your dharma isn't so good, your karma's bad, you come back from his feet and you come down lower. So the caste system is an expression of this karma reincarnation loop. And the further up you go, it's not just resources, opportunities, it's not just wealth and enjoyment in life. It's also you're closer to the goal of moksha, being reuniting your soul with the Brahman. So this caste system has in its way of looking at it, these religious roots. So it makes it very difficult for anybody to get ahead. Because you're a merchant, you're supposed to be a merchant because your karma says from your last life, that's exactly where you're supposed to be. So you don't deserve to get ahead. You can earn your way ahead in the next life, but not in this life. Sorry, too bad, so sad. And
Once a farmer, always a farmer, you're a
that's it. That's where you're stuck. Now, that's not as much the case in a more modern India, if you can call it that. It depends on where you are. That there have been efforts made by the Indian government, as much as it's able, to blur some of these lines so that there are opportunities trying to be made and there aren't certain, what's the word I'm looking for?
Restrictions.
Not just restrictions, but what's the word?
Boundaries.
Taboos that go with some of these castes, so that if you're this, it's thought you can't be any better. Those things, as India is struggling with what we would say is the modern world, the Western world, and the more influence that exerts on them, that's becoming a tension in the caste system. It's not as strict as it was. But if we're talking 500 years ago, you're born a sewage worker, you're going to work sewage their whole life. Sorry. Even if you're the best sewage worker there is, doesn't matter.
They're getting promoted.
You're never getting a promotion. You deserve to be in that caste.
Well, sure.
By your karma.
In this country, we value education, better ourselves through education. And so if you have a guy that's in the position you just described that has a doctorate, he's still going to stay in that position regardless of his education.
If you're in this position, or I believe this one, you weren't allowed education. Your education here is, there's the sewage, clean it up.
That's it, and you
Figure
can't
it
go to
out.
school.
And I'm saying sewage because that's the most
Yeah.
unsanitary thing. With the other things here, your education is, see that? Here's how you grow it. Here's how you harvest it. Here's how you prepare it. That's your education. It's not until you get to merchants enough that any sort of idea that we would have education, learning for learning's sake to better yourself would even apply.
Now, the priests, are they educated for
They're
their,
the top of the food chain.
I understand.
They're thought to be the most educated because they know the Vedas the best. They spend all of their time in communion with the whatever, Brahma, with meditation, with reading the Vedas, with helping others express their religious devotion, to earn Dharma, to put more Dharma in.
Which is interesting because the whole thing about Dharma and all that stuff just goes to pot when you talk about this, because it's like, if you're down there in the peasant world and everyone's supposed to have Brahma in blah, 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 but you're treating them like crap.
How does that
You
make sense?
just whitewashed everything you just.
But if you convinced yourself that there's order to the universe, and this is the expression of that order,
Yeah,
somehow you could say, well, then Dharma makes perfect. I agree, it doesn't make
yeah,
sense.
no, because I mean, if even if the worm has Brahma in them, then, I mean, but like even with the Daltis, it's like, how they're treated slaves and whatever, which they are. It just makes no sense that you're seeing Brahma in somebody and showing respect and blah, blah, blah.
Well, for the untouchables, I don't know if it's so much the case today, but my understanding is you want to just go up and punch them. They deserve it, so you can be violent toward the untouchable.
I mean, the
just for
violence
fun.
was a lot worse earlier than it is now, but I mean,
Sure.
untouchable really still goes with like leprosy and stuff like this, and any other, but yeah.
If I'm a warrior and I have a child, is that child automatically a warrior?
You're in that caste. You're
That was my question too. What if your parents are in a different caste? You're reincarnated into that already casted system?
Yeah,
Well, if
so
you're
that-
reincarnated, you can be reincarnated up or down, depending on how you live. But if you being born, you are born into whatever caste you were born in.
You're stuck for your whole life.
And you're stuck.
Right, so your parents
Your parents determined your future.
determined,
Yeah.
yeah.
But when you said reincarnation was hundreds of thousands of times, so you had so many chances to, and that's where you're gonna end up in.
And
Well, I'm sure that motivates some of that lower class to do well and continue so that they have a chance of coming back a little bit higher.
That
can we all agree this seems like a really lousy system?
The caste system is horrible.
It's,
It's horrible.
it's right for discrimination, it's right for prejudice, it's right, it's the way that you could justify mistreating people, which seems, as you've already said, the exact opposite of the principles of Dharma that supposedly govern.
How does the caste system fit outside of human beings too?
I don't know that it applies outside of human beings.
So if you're a cow, that's it for you?
I mean,
Isn't that a good
if you're a
question?
good cow, you might come back as an untouchable.
If you give me a really good
If you give a lot of milk or have the best steaks or, I guess that would not be a good Hindu.
No, it's just feeling it.
You have to eat grass really well, not eat too much that you ruin the field, eat just enough so that it grows back. Yeah, question, Brad.
No, that's just how it's gotta be. Gotta be a.
Now, how many people,
Exactly, whatever that
And
means.
then be reported as.
Right. And that's your hope.
I'm trying to be a cow.
There you go, at least they respect you.
I'd rather be a cow.
Exactly, there's respect because respect for a cow over what may be the two lowest of the caste,
Right.
which,
now, how many people are involved in this, in India? You said 1.5 billion? I think,
that's the population.
and,
I just have my notes from
all these
last
people are crammed into that area, and this is what they practice for 7,000 years.
The world is getting bigger, the more technology influences even what used to be more isolated regions.
Yeah.
You know, and that, as that happens, things change. You know, people are exposed to different ideas. Then these old, cast hard, rigid ideas are rejected. It's not a great system. It is the Hindu system. It is changing, but the underlying idea of where you fall in the social order, I think even is still there in what we might consider some of the more enlightened places in India. It doesn't mean they're, and all men are created equal, blah, 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 blah. You might have heard that somewhere. Last two things that aren't really social, they're just fun. Two holidays you may have heard of, Holi and Diwali. Holi is the color day. And that was perfect timing. For what it's worth. This is in the spring, Festival of Colors. It's kind of like, it's like the color runs. You can go and they throw chalk on you, you dress up, you go out, and there's powders and colors everywhere, and it's a big party. The colors mean something. Orange is bravery, yellow, sincerity, green, vitality, blue, power, purple, dedication, pink, friendliness, red, unity. So they gather together and they throw powder at each other. Woo! It's a big deal. It's a really festive time. Diwali is the festival of lights. That's the Hindu New Year. It's other religions, lights. So it's like Hindu Hanukkah. This is being recorded. I should watch what I say. So it's 5 days of celebration. You put lights in your homes. You honor the goddess Lakshmi. So it's a lot about family. So it sounds like, you know, what we would say a Christmassy, Thanksgiving-y, very similar holiday. And I don't know, I didn't write this down when the New Year is. I don't know if the Hindu New Year corresponds with our New Year.
Number one to five.
I know I see these two words on my calendar on my phone all the time.
Diwali is,
Can I search?
wasn't that long ago, on my WhatsApp from.
Monday, October 21st. No, so it's Friday, November 1st of this year is the first day of Diwali. Next year, it's October 21st. So it's a fall, not a winter holiday. So these are probably more than temple worship. These are the places where everybody kind of comes together and celebrates. We're all doing this. We're throwing powder at each other, or we're spending time with our families. I did one last point about Diwali. A lot of this centers around Lord Krishna and some of the tales about him. And that is the end of my notes. And I told you, I went longer than I thought. So I'm done. How about you? Any thoughts, comments, questions that I can pretend that I might know the answer to? Yes, sir.
How does Hinduism view Jesus Christ?
Hinduism is fine with Jesus. Went to a Hindu temple and I went to saw all their idols, and they took us in their library. And the first thing the guy did, because we were seminary class, he said, I have the Bible. And I know you believe in Jesus, and Jesus is good with us. Take your pick. Jesus is your God. Do your devotion to Jesus. Good. Just don't ask us to do our devotion to Jesus. And they would not view him the way we view him. Like Muslims have respect for Jesus as a prophet. For the Hindu, there's not respect for him as a unique individual, but he's fine if you want to follow him.
Is this the basis where a lot of the New Age quote stuff got their ideas?
Eastern religions definitely feed what we would consider New Age, Western New Age.
I know as we talk about this, seems like those are ideas that I hear.
You would see ideas of karma, reincarnation,
Right.
or maybe not to quite the extreme of Hinduism in New Age philosophies. Connection with the universe through crystals and different things, the New Age idea that you could see present in Dharma.
Thought it sounded that way.
All right, I got one.
Okay.
So going back to the idols, they talk a lot in the Old Testament about idols. Rachel sat on a camel, Jacob made everybody get rid of their idols. Would it be possible to say that these different tribes were part of that before they came over to Judaism? Or at the time was Judaism so new, you could say, that people just didn't grasp the thought of God, they kept their idols. To me, the way you've described it, it sounds like the idols that the early Israelites carried could possibly be something like this, especially considering the region and the timeline.
So most of the ancient Near Eastern faiths, we see a few mentioned in the Old Testament, we know there are others, were polytheistic,
Right.
and gods corresponded to certain needs. I need fertility because I want to have children. I
Right.
need fertility. I want my crops to grow. I need rain. And so these different gods were represented, just like in Hinduism, by idols. So
Right.
there's something within humanity
That needs the
that says, I need to know how I can control. And this was, I think, the ancient Near Eastern philosophy, and even Hinduism to some degree. I need to find a way to connect to and or control the uncontrollable forces around me. And so I subscribe or name this idol as in charge of that. And then if I can somehow create a figure that represents that, and I figure out what homage I have to pay, then that figure I somehow exert control over my environment, which is uncontrollable. So this is humanity. This is certainly the first generations that we encounter in the book of Genesis that struggle with this, because this was the culture they were in, and the uniqueness of the commands that God gives through Moses. One of them is, number one is, you shall know the gods before me. And then a couple more later, it's no idols. So these were revolutionary ideas that were meant to set apart Israel from everybody else that they had a hard time giving up. Yeah.
Along the same line, I find it interesting though, because like scripturally, when they're talking about God, the false gods and stuff like Baal and Moloch and all those, but interestingly enough, I'm thinking the same thing almost, because it's like maybe they had different names back then. I don't know, because sure. I mean, just curious if there isn't any mention of these names per se in scripture.
Because it's a different language.
Well, that's true too. That's what I'm saying. So I wonder if they are, similar with different names. Because I mean, if that was from before Judaism per se,
Yeah.
then I mean, these have been around. I'm gonna have to look those up.
It wouldn't
Had
be
different
surprising
names, yeah, because like I said, different languages could be the same thing.
to have very similar ideas, representations of these things. And yeah.
I looked up of karma is inherited based on the occupation of the parents. No, it's a very complex system, it says, and it's even based on 4 parts. and even based on economics and politics geography. And on hierarchy, Yati and Varna. Yati is then more when the person is born, what place, and like astrology, so whatever. Economics, politics, what was needed in that area at that time. So it's not based on parents' occupation.
But you are born into a caste.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you were born. And I know that inderdaad, if you're born and you're seen as a beggar, untouchable, and people want to be better in a beggar, that they even damage their own body to be a better beggar, It's the only way.
Gotta be a good cow, gotta be a good beggar, gotta be a good whatever.
Gotta be a good worm.
Gotta be a good worm, whatever that means. Yeah, it's a very, it's an interesting faith. Ultimately, it feels to me to think 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 reincarnations. Where is hope in that?
Yeah.
I mean, you might. I'm 15. I want to better myself, but I can't because I was born as this. My only way I can better myself is to die. Where is hope in that? I think it would seem to me a really good system if you're at the top of it because you have lots of control over everybody under you.
If you want,
But
I don't like so much control.
But considering how long it's been around, per se, as far as the writings and everything else, you would think it would have evolved in something a little bit more.
There'd be a lot more priests.
Well, that makes more sense. I mean,
Over all this time, you guys are really bad at this.
It would be priests, right?
you would think that it would evolve into something a little bit more logical, if you will. I mean,
Yeah.
there is Hinduism, in my mind, has no logic whatsoever.
No.
And
Like he said.
it's just like, it's almost like a lazy religion in a sense to me that even though they have all this stuff, it's like you don't really have to know any of that stuff to be a good Hindu, say. I mean, you should study the Vedas and all this stuff, but I don't know, it's to me, I mean, having grown up in the heat of it, it never made sense to me. And it's one of the saddest religions too.
And as
One of
your
the
parents,
saddest religions.
your parents being missionaries, how hard was it to infiltrate that mindset to win people to faith?
You can't, but I mean, like for my parents, I mean, we had servants. We had to because my parents were gone a lot. But the way we treated our servants was like family. And that went a long way because of the caste system, because of that we treated them with they were in our home, we invited them, gave them things, whatever. And that made a big difference in that whole concept that they were valuable. Whereas, their religions and stuff like that made them not valuable, that they were made valuable. Just because we treated them as human beings and obviously had a lot of fights with them, but you know what I mean, it made a big difference. And so, but like I said, they're looking for something that makes sense too. So in that sense, they were reachable, but in the sense that anything goes, unless you got to the heart of worth, everything, theology is nothing. I mean, it made no sense because they're full of their own crazy theologies, but
I think
when it came down to work, that made a big difference.
I think the hardest part to have any impact on a Hindu person is the fact that faith is a choose your own way.
Exactly.
There's some basic things that seem to be important, but really beyond that, whatever works for you.
Exactly.
And work hard enough, and
So I still am friends with some of the kids of our servants that we had growing up, and they were like our family, and they made a big difference. It's just something they didn't experience in their world at all.
But if you look in our society, you see some people who work very hard.
Yeah.
But if they don't make it, they don't make it. And you could also say is that already premeditated or what is that, you know? I know very intelligent people and they live like a hoarder and they can't come out of that, you know? It's just, they have a mess around them and it looks like what is that now? Is this now premeditated or whatever? Because you cannot help these people, you know? It's just.
Maybe that would make it easier to witness to them. Because they go from a grouped hoping to make it to the next caste, the next one up, to being a unique child of one God. I would think it'd be easier than going, say, to someone from Islam and trying to say, hey, you know, Jesus is the way, Jesus is the truth.
But in this,
These guys don't have, they're in a system.
but this religion is very visual though. So like if you're talking faith, of believing in something you can't see and you know, and making all these life decisions or stuff based on something you can't see and you have to have faith. Here you have these tangible things, you know, you have these things you see and you can do for, and you think you're actually, you know, and it's more of a, it's tactile, it's visual, it's all that. So it, you know, it's right there in front of you. What are you talking about? There's somebody out there that I'm supposed to believe. It's right here. You see it?
You also have to consider
Yeah.
the upper castes at the top of the system want to keep things the way they are so they stay in power. So they keep the status quo and control.
Well, the caste system is a lot political too, though.
Yeah.
And
They control
it is
things.
as much as it is religion. It's really a
And that's
lot.
why you have, over history, you have strong men that came in the Second World War, First World War. But there are people that have control, that want to keep control and keep things the way they are.
Very human of us.
And so they keep the people that are worms.
Yeah.
And they don't.
And I think what you're also hinting at in both of what you've said is this is not just a faith. This is actually an entire cultural system.
Absolutely.
that they're a part of. It
More
affects,
than religion.
you know, I didn't talk a lot about worldview, but except to say that, but you're shaped by looking at your world that way. And it's reinforced in the culture around you. And so to hear a Western, Christianity is not a Western religion. I get that. It's a Middle Eastern religion. But a Westerner to come in and try to, you know, to them, it's I won't say an assault, but it could see not just asking them to change their faith, but to maybe deny an entire cultural system.
Well, like you said, 80% of India is Hindu. So if you're talking about 80% of the people in your world believe this, you know, they believe it, it's gotta be right. I mean, you don't have exposure per se into anything else, you know, unless God willing that you get put into a situation where you are.
But every system has that.
Well, that's true, but I
But
mean,
look at the Christianity. They say thou shalt not kill. Now look in Miami, 2 times a day and murder. You know, there is toch something not working in that system in that way. You know,
Yeah, I mean, any culture will impact how we view our faith. Whether it's in the case of India, an 80% prevalence in your culture of a certain faith, or whether it's less, you know, the danger is, and I'll say this for Christians, that sometimes we can enmesh our Western American culture and call it Christianity. So, you know, like the values of Western American culture are individualism, materialism, and consumerism. It's hard to find those in the Bible. And so we got this tension that we live in as Christians. So we live in it every day. We live in a Western culture that promotes certain things that we would say, oh, right, we're individualism. No, we're part of a family, a community of faith. And materialism, we're supposed to be marked by generosity, not by greed and materialism. And consumerism, we're not supposed to be takers, we're supposed to be servants. How do I reconcile those seemingly opposite realities? I have trouble as a Westerner and as an American doing that, much less bringing that idea into a totally different culture. It's the challenge of faith. Maybe I've contacted Josh and Micah, who are missionaries in India. They're in the region where Agra is, where the Taj Mahal is. Big region of, I think, about 6 million people in the region that they are. They're stateside. They may be able to come down in December. And so if they can, we can ask them those questions, because they are starting churches in cities among people groups, among language groups. Not churches like building a building and saying church, but in somebody's house where believers are gathering together. And it's pretty cool to hear about that. So we might get to hear firsthand from them how that's going.
My sister, she traveled to Bali in not India, but it's more the East. And she said, more peaceful than anything. So then I think, well, yeah, there's not something really system.
Do the peaceful until they run into Muslims.
What was it? Somebody else?
Do the ones that are servants, do they really keep on doing, since they're not going to be able to move up any or get any better? Do they really work at it, or?
Well, their hope is if they work at it their entire lives and then die, then maybe they'll move up. So, you could see how that would be a tension. I've been doing this for 50 years and I'm tired of doing this. Kill me. My only hope is to die. Why do I want to go on living? So,
Bet on the reincarnation. There you go.
all right. Well, we're at 7:22, which is time to pray and wrap this bad boy up. Father in heaven, we thank you for the hope that we have in your son, Jesus. And as we've talked about the Hindu faith for these last few weeks, and even as we've discussed in these last few minutes, thinking about what feels like a life that you're trapped in, and there's not much hope. Yes, there's reincarnation. Yes, there's another life, but to know what we have in you, that your son came and died and rose again, and that in him you have promised us not just life in your eternal kingdom, but abundant life here and now, where we see your kingdom impact our lives and others. Lord, help us to especially as we consider other faiths, to realize how fortunate, how blessed, what a good life we have. Because, we talked about, I realize when I think about my own life, I was born in a home that was a Christian family. And that's one of the reasons I'm a believer today, that I was exposed to the message of Jesus and came to understand who you were and my need for you as Savior, and place my faith in you. And if I was born in Saudi Arabia or in India or in some other part of the world, my life story might be much different. So I'm grateful for to have just this simple privilege of your sovereignty, of coming to know us. And Lord, help us be encouraged by that. Help us to be motivated to share that hope that we have with those who have so little hope, whether they might not ever be in India, but it could be even in our own neighborhoods, in our own circles of influence. Father, help us to be your ambassadors wherever we go. Thank you for this chance to get together, to talk, to ask questions, to learn together. May it benefit us, and may the rest of this week we live in light of who you are and what you have done for us. We pray in Christ's name.